So you like Affinity Designer, and what now? Should you stop using Procreate altogether? I got this question asked a few times, why did I switch to Affinity and if I'm still using Procreate. The short answer is yes and no. I still prefer Affinity Designer. I switched all my surface pattern design to this program because I just simply think that it's way too powerful, and if you get to know the tool, you will start thinking about why you have been missing out all this time. There are limitless numbers of layers. You can draw everything in Vector, and you can combine both Vector and Pixel in one software. This is just to name a few arguments. I truly believe that this topic deserves a separate YouTube video. So I would say that currently I'm using Affinity Designer 99% of the time, and the remaining 1% I actually just book it out for sketching. I am still running a digital sketchbook in Procreate, and I don't want to abandon the tool entirely because I spent many years drawing in Procreate, and I'm very grateful for the skill that I could acquire through my drawing and through my sketching practice in Procreate, and I don't want to cross it out entirely. So if you have taken some of my Affinity Designer classes, you will probably see that I do have at least one lesson devoted to some sort of planning and sketching in Procreate, and this is exactly how I'm using still Procreate combined with Affinity. I stopped drawing in Procreate altogether. I'm not doing any pattern design in Procreate. I think I'm really missing out too much, and that's why everything is shifted to Affinity. But Procreate still has insanely good brushes. I have some of my most favorite brushes there that resemble real pencils and smudgy graphite, and just the drawing, the sketching experience is so much better still in Procreate. Maybe because the files are much smaller, there are certain limits depending on what iPad model you have. I do notice that if I work in really big Affinity Designer files with a lot of symbols, and then I switch to the pixel persona, sometimes it can lag a little bit. So indeed, well, if you know Procreate, you know what I'm talking about. The drawing experience is just very close to real life. That being said, I still do most of my planning and sketching in Procreate, and in today's video I wanted to share with you a bonus lesson from one of my Affinity Designer courses, the one on designing and vectorizing vector assets and then using them for surface design. I'm attaching here one extra lesson about planning and sketching out my to-be vector assets. This is the part that I do in Procreate, and I wanted to share it with you today. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I will be sharing more graphic design and surface design goodness. I also started a Substack newsletter. I will include all the links in the description box below. Enjoy the free lesson! In this lesson, I would like to show you my time-lapse video from Procreate and briefly explain how I prepared my sketch and my color samples. So let's have a look together. I recommend sketching in Procreate or any other digital drawing tool with a form of a soft pencil. I drew mainly from my imagination, and my goal was to get very flowy botanical shapes. So you will see, for example, here that I tried to include the shapes that I liked so much about this ginkgo leaf from my mood board. Another advice that I could give you here is to include a variety of forms and shapes. So I have a few shapes that are more round, a few shapes that are more edgy and a little bit longer. I have bigger blooms, smaller blooms, really tiny berries, super small flowers that will be good as fillers, some shapes that are a little bit more pointy and edgy, and I try to spread everything evenly on my canvas so that it will be easier later on to vectorize it in Affinity. So here I marked with color the different categories of flowers that I created. The yellow color are the main blooms. They're a little bit bigger, they're a little bit more round. The burnt orange color are the secondary flowers that are a little bit more edgy and a little bit longer in their form. Next, I have the really flowy, round, as if soft, ginkgo-inspired leaf shapes that will be pretty good as fillers. On that purple background, you see the more spiky and edgy filler flowers. We also have a few berries and a few more tiny berries on this soft pink color. The reason why I marked everything in color is that I wanted to show you that there is no color in isolation. What it means is that for every category of those blooms or leaves, I have at least 2 elements. So you will see here that out of this sketch sheet, we will have 28 assets. For example, from the category of those main or hero flowers, we will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The ginkgo leaves, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 assets. From those berries, we have 1, 2, 3. They have slightly different shape. I recommend that you play around with the angles. So one flower can, or one leaf can tip to the left, one can be more straight, and one can tip to the left. Those main flowers, they seem to be very similar, but they still have different shapes. Apart from the hero blooms and secondary blooms and some extra leaves and berries, I also recommend that you include some tiny blooms, which you will be able to use as handy fillers. I have one example here for you. I think I reuse those tiny blooms everywhere in my patterns. I really like them. Let me check if you can see that clearly. Yeah, those are 2 different patterns, but I was able to reuse those filler blooms in both of them. Next, directly in Procreate, I played around with a potential color palette. So you will also see that I always start with the background. I have also later on reduced the opacity of the sketch, and then I continued laying down the colors on separate layers in Procreate, modifying them up and down, making them brighter, making them darker, till I was happy with how they worked. And every time I work on a color palette, I try out 2 different color variations. So here comes the second one. For the color palette number 2, I just knew I wanted this really intense electric blue. And then I knew that it will be standing in fantastic contrast with this cadmium orange. Finally, when my sketch was done, I kept the main sketch and I got rid of the background layer so that the background is transparent. And I exported this sketch through Share as a PNG with a transparent background. And then this is what you saw previously. I have made some copies. I put the 2 color thumbnails next to each other. I put my sketch in the middle. And then I took a very thick brush. I think, yeah, this one, the hard airbrush, some sort of a big chunky brush. And with the eyedropper tool, I selected the main colors. I painted the background here first because I always like to see how the colors interact on a given background, not just on white. And then I put some blobs of paint. And in this way also in Affinity Designer later on, it will be easier for me to select my colors and to pick them, because I think Affinity is still quite limited with the management of the color palettes. Procreate is much better with that regard. Now I can go back to Designer and I can paste them in here into my mood board. This is my ready-made mood board. You can repeat this process in exactly the same way in version 1. Did you know that you can also sketch directly in Affinity Designer? We can do that by using the pixel persona, and in the next lesson I would like to show you exactly that.